what can I do differently that makes me feel like I'm living in my life rather than trying to escape it every weekend, or when you clock out of work, or when it reaches a certain point in the week where you maybe feel like you can catch a breath. Friend, here's something I don't know if you know. While the podcast was a thought of mine for a long time, thinking of me absolutely could not be doing this without our very own Wizard of Oz, Kyle, at Goodknight Podcasting Solutions. Kyle's turnaround time, dedication and level of service means that I never have to second guess or worry about the level of support in getting our messaging out to you. If you're curious as to starting your own podcast, or just want to see how it might spread your message, reach out to Kyle at kylegoodknight.com or check our show notes. I mean it when I say that we couldn't be doing this without him. Hello, happy Thoughtful Tuesday. Welcome to Lauren's Thoughts on the Thinking of Me podcast, where today we're actually going to be really tight, my friends, as I planned one very specific seed of thought for you. And before I do that, I just want to say that we're coming to a wrap of season 2, the Thinking of Me podcast action and exploring season. And as we do, that was a conscious choice to explore some of the messages and the meanings in and around the stories of our speakers we've heard so far. So before we announce what season 3 will look like and how Thinking of Me is progressing forward, I just again want to say thanks to everyone who's made this possible to happen, and for you, friend, for listening and showing up yourself every week to kind of go, well, what can I think a little differently about this topic, or what can I learn? And Thoughtful Tuesdays of a Tuesday is very specific, because of a Tuesday was when I used to always find the harder day of the week. We built a bit of momentum, a small bit, on a Monday, where with the adrenaline or the over planning that's happened on a Sunday to get ready for the week and plan all the things out and say, yeah, this is the week ahead. But by the time Tuesday morning comes around, it's nearly harder than a Monday sometimes, or you're more tired on a Tuesday evening because it's the case of, God, is this really happening? And I'm grateful to be living a life that is designed for living. It's not just one of circumstance. And I invite you, friend, to have a question in the back of your mind throughout this short episode of, what can I do differently that makes me feel like I'm living in my life rather than trying to escape it every weekend, or when you clock out of work, or when it reaches a certain point in the week where you maybe feel like you can catch a breath. If your breath is in listening to this episode, thank you for coming this direction to do that. Because as I say, Tuesdays were the harder day, and currently I'm in a bit of a default state. If you're watching this, I'm without any makeup on. I'm in my cozies, as I call them. I'm wearing woolen cozy clothes. My hair isn't done, and this is naturally what I look like if I make no effort at all. And what are you naturally like when you make no effort at all? What is your reset button like after taking a rest, taking some sleep, or taking a break for some work? What do you show up as or like? And how are you showing up to the things that you are putting an effort into? Like, I can put my hand up and say that I'm someone who would strive to perfect the basic. An example there is even with makeup, like the bare basic makeup look. I've never really mastered it as a girl, and I admire the girls that can go out the door without any kind of makeup and their skin is great. My skin is quite sensitive and can go quite red, but it's something I used to always be really conscious of, especially when exercising, and still am to this day, where if I know there's a certain thing I have to show up as or show up for, I'll prepare myself in an automatic default, as I call it, with that bare face makeup. Am I making sense here? So friend listening, what would you not do in public that if you were doing it in private you could be seen that you could do differently? Is that something like flaking out on the couch from one end of the evening to the other? Is that something like how you show up in your physical appearance? Is it something like the things that you eat or the conversations that you have? What would you not do in public that maybe you're doing in private that is giving you a little bit of imposter syndrome in who you are really? I've started getting dressed as if I was in my last profession and out and about and actively being seen, I suppose, in that role, in the kind of clothes I used to wear as I show up for business now, because it brings about the identity of what I'm doing, who I'm showing up for, and who I am really. I'm showing up for this episode right now, as I say, in my cozies, in my comfies, to kind of emphasize as well, but also really show this is my default state. My default state is having the comfortable shoes on, is wearing the woolly clothes, maybe that are warm around the house. And if someone was to come in, I'm not ashamed of how I'm seen, but yet to walk out the door, maybe there's a step up, a level up into that natural default. So that's my intentional question for you with this brief one today is, who are you in public versus who are you in private? And how can you show up in a new default, maybe in both? Is that something that's helping you in your business, in your work, your career, in your relationships, in your studies, in your hobbies, whatever it might be? Who are you in public, and how can you enhance that default state of self in private? What would you have to talk about? What would you have to think about? What kind of conversations would you have? What kind of foods would you eat? What habits do you have to maintain? And how can you structure yourself for success? This is a Tuesday. There's still the rest of the week, depending on the job you do. Maybe your weekends of a Friday and you've got your weekend. Maybe you work across the weekends. Maybe you're an entrepreneur as well and you're working all hours, every hour of the day in the week. But how can you set up a structure that will give you a bit of a routine to allow for the moments of default so that you're not in a constant state of, I don't know, slump or strive? Friend, this week I had the chance to spend some time with an old friend and completely switch off from work. Couldn't fully switch off from some of the circumstance, and really grateful for where real friendships show up in those humble moments of what is a massive change season. And I'm grateful to have taken that slow time to remember who I default as a friend, and to recognize and see some of the defaults that I have still in certain conversations and around things like finance, for example, because it's when you show up completely as you are and can look at that then you can reflect and either celebrate or make a slight tweak, a slight change to even improve further. And if you're a like-minded friend that is a high achiever, overachiever, success driven, that wants to always do a little bit better, that thinks there can be more to ourselves, that we can do more, be more, give more, be better for ourselves and for others, then it gives you a mirror to, as we say, reflect on and decide how to be even a little bit better. I'm looking at myself here, as I say, and one thing I can do better is maybe my skincare. So they're my thoughts for this week. I'll leave it there. The Masters of Thriving in person live podcast mastermind event is happening in the Mullingar Park Hotel on March 29th at 2 p.m. Tickets are available on the thinkingofmecoaching.com/masters website. We have a variety of speakers. Some of those announcements are already coming out, so check our socials. Check at Lauren Jean or at Thinking of Me Coaching on Instagram, on Facebook and on TikTok to hear who our guest speakers are as they come out. And it's an event that will honestly be like no other. I have not done something like this at this scale with Thinking of Me yet, and I'm really grateful to our guest speakers for saying yes, to the people who are already coming, and to you, friend, who I know supports in the loud and quiet ways. But with that, go and let me know your thoughts. Reach out through social media and talk to you next week.